pour it
For
out
this
like Niagara
episode, for
Falls.
those of you that listen.
Okay, now we're streaming. Everything should be good. Hello, everyone who's listening. Let's do a show, shall we? I tell you guys that Paul Search commented in one of the guild videos and disagreed with something I'm doing. That's not fun. I'll tell you all about it later.
You're like, oh, I'm sorry.
I read it and I was like, shit.
Shnikes.
All right, where the hell's the record button? Okay, here we go.
Welcome to Wood Talk for woodworkers by woodworkers. Now here are three guys who put the fine in fine woodworking. Mark, Matt, and Shannon.
Yeah, that's right. We're pretty fine. It's Wood Talk number 156 for November 4th, 2013. On today's show, we're talking about... You know what, Matt? When you hit the back button, did we delete all the stuff at the top that I had written there?
We're talking
Maybe.
All
We're talking
right.
about some stuff today, folks. Just go to the show notes and you're going to see it.
You will see the
Let
things we're
it be
talking
a
about.
surprise for once.
It's going to be a surprise for me when I read it. What the heck? It just disappeared. That's great. All right, so let's get to those topics later on. Maybe I'll just re-record this later. We'll see. See how motivated I am. But hey, before we get to all that stuff that I didn't just say, let's hear a quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is supported by Festool, helping woodworkers get better results in less time and with less mess to clean up afterwards. Visit them online at festoolusa.com. Man, now I'm looking through here going, all right, crap. So what else is missing? I don't see anything else missing, so I guess we're okay for now.
Well, that's because it's missing.
Actually, there's a second question for Shannon that's missing. Apparently, we're only letting Shannon have one question today.
Oh, man, this is going to be a fun show. All right, let's just dig into it. So what's on the bench? I'll go first. I've got some veneer on my bench that's in the process of being flattened. So I purchased some of that veneer flattening solution from veneersupplies.com. And it's supposed to be better than like the home brews. I don't know if you guys ever played with this stuff, but you basically mix glycerin, alcohol, a little bit of glue, and some water, and you can make a veneer flattening solution. And the problem with stuff like that is it tends to be, it takes a long...
Explosive?
Yeah, it could be, right? It takes a long time to dry, and it may actually seal the wood fibers so much that if you wanted to stain it, you won't be able to stain it. And sometimes you have issues with the adhesion of various types of glue. So I tried this pre-made stuff, and fingers crossed, it supposedly, according to the marketing literature, will not have those issues, but we'll see. So I've got some stuff flattening right now, and tomorrow I'll take a look at it.
Oh, very nice. That ought to be pretty good.
And... the other thing I have is really big, actually. The Woodworkers Fighting Cancer event is underway. Started with a video on Monday. I worked my butt off all weekend to try and squeeze this thing in right in the middle of a guild build, which is what I call good planning and good timing on my part. But I worked all weekend and got this easel made, recorded, and the video out early this morning. So... yeah, good
It
little...
sounds to me like you just don't like yourself, and you're like, what would be the most difficult thing to do?
Well, you know, to be fair, Nicole did do the plan and set the schedule, so it may just be that she doesn't like me. But yeah, so this...
I didn't want to tell you.
yeah, this easel project is done. It's really about a day and a half kind of project. If you have to mill the lumber yourself, maybe 2 days to get it done. So it goes together quickly, and it's a great charity. So if you guys, I'm not going to give all the details here. You can find them at woodworkersfightingcancer.com if you want to join in on this build and help out with the cause. And we're trying to get another $10,000 this year. I went back through and I started tabulating what we've done over the last 3 years, and we've contributed almost $25,000 to cancer charities. I was like, that's not a small number.
No, that's not. That's not chump change. That's like significant, especially for, kind of almost an organization that you really have to know about. I mean, this isn't like something that you don't have marathons going on. You don't have, these big giant all over the nation kind of a thing. Well, you kind of do if you think about it. But
sort of, yeah. But the NFL isn't like wearing our colors or anything,
not yet.
Yeah, someday maybe. So yeah, so we're really proud of that. Almost $25,000 to cancer charity. So it's good stuff. Woodworkersfightingcancer.com. You could check it all out. How about you, Matt? What are you up to?
Well, the big thing for me is not a heck of a lot this past weekend. I did a lot of editing for the show, a lot of catching up, but I still have a whole bunch more to go. I think if I had a whole army of interns, I would make a small dent in the things that I probably should be doing to make it a better show. But what are you going to do? Maybe get some small children from third world countries smuggled in. That might be the best way to go.
Okay.
But the big thing for me is the folks over at Steel City. I was talking with them about the project I'm working on right now, the Aiden's platform bed, and I've got some really kind of some curly figured wood going on with this. And I know for a fact that my current thickness planer is just going to eat this stuff up, and I'm going to have to like say, no, that texture is for a reason. Leave it alone. Quit putting stuff on there. So I said, you know, it would be really neat. Let's do a head-to-head with one of those spiral head cutters with all the neat little blades that you can flip around if they chip and stuff like that. And I just, for my own curiosity, I want to see what happens with it. I know we've had plenty of people always ask this question, you know, what is it really worth it? What's the difference with it? So they were nice enough to send me one. And I don't know if I'm going to be nice enough to send it back to them when I get done, but I have it in the shop, and I'm getting ready to do a side-by-side comparison and throw some really, I don't know, I'm going to try and find the gnarliest figured wood that I could. Maybe Shannon, if you have some of those scraps out in your trash bin there at work, perhaps you could maybe send me a couple. That would be kind of fun to run through. And
I've got some
split the work in half.
really evil wood that I could probably dig up and send to you.
Yeah, I would just be really curious to see how much of a difference it makes. I mean, even if there's tear out, how minimal is that tear out compared to the traditional one? In fact, I even went out and bought new blades for my old thickness planer just so that I could do like a true side-by-side saying, you know, these both have the same amount of time on these blades. So it should be either really interesting or one of those things where the manufacturer says, can you take that video down? And how much is it going to cost us to get that video down?
You know, what I found with my planer, I've got a spiral helical head on there. I haven't really even had to think about sharpening the blades. And I remember with my standard straight knife planer that I used to have, it would just be this cycle. Like over time, I'd get to this point where, okay, things are getting a little bit more tedious to push through. The results aren't as good. It's taking a lot more effort to get these boards to run through it. And the one that I have now, it's like I have to remind myself to pay attention and go, wait a minute, is it time to rotate those a little bit for a fresh edge? Because it's really not performing any different than it did when it was brand new. And it's now years into it. You know, so not only do they stay sharper longer, but when you do have to switch them, all you got to do is flip those little suckers around. But I got to remember just to even pay attention to it because it does not dull as fast as the straight knives did for me.
Well, I can tell you, considering how long they go at the millwork at the lumberyard before they change them, and when I think we're up at 16,000 linear feet a day right now.
Wow.
Is what they're running through the mill. And I looked at the little maintenance clipboard thing up there, and it shows when they were, you know, when the knives were changed, when they were rotated, all that stuff. And it's like, really? It was like 2 weeks ago. And it's like, well, 2 weeks. Yeah, but it's 16,000 feet a day.
Yeah.
You know, that really puts it in perspective. Now, you know, this may be slightly different carbide. You know, they're bigger, all that stuff and everything. But it's still, you know, we as home woodworkers have moved into like the industrial world with these carbide replaceable cutter head things. They're just awesome.
Yeah, and what are you doing? Maybe like at most one of us might do a dozen projects in a year, and they're all small to medium sized
projects. I haven't
projects.
done 16,000 linear feet yet.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
So it'll be a while.
It's probably going to be 10 more years before I do.
Yeah, I actually have a feeling that I'll probably, you know, get so much better results from this just because of the fact that I'm so lazy when it comes to wanting to swap out those other blades. And so I have a feeling that if it's something as simple as just flipping around, and I already took the hood off to look and see exactly how they're set up and everything, that, yeah, I think I'm going to be getting, you know, a much better result, at least at that medium phase. You know, then maybe when I actually head to my hand planes, I won't have to spend so much time trying to get that little groove down, that little raised part from where I never removed the nick and the old blade. I don't know about I don't know what I'm going to do. That's part of my routine.
I used to have a piece of masking tape across my planer, and I made little like hash marks where those nicks were in the blade.
I was just thinking that.
I used to do that too.
It's like, well, I need this to be a clean cut, so let's just slide it in between those two little tick marks so that I don't get that ridge on it.
I do the same thing with the drum sander. I put a little tick mark to show me where like the little burnt on, caked on stuff is, because
awesome.
you want to get every last bit out of it that you can. So.
Oh yeah, there's our tips. How to be as lazy as possible so you don't have to change things around.
That's being conservative and efficient is what that is.
It's not
There you
lazy.
go.
That's
I'm sorry, I can only make this project out of 1/8 inch wide material because I have so many nicks across my blades. I got this one little spot right here.
There you go. Nice.
So sweet. That's what's going on with me though. Shannon, how about you? I'm not gonna approach this one because I will get us in so much trouble.
Yeah, I wrote something in here, and someone has changed what I wrote about what I've been doing.
Oh, come on, Shannon, just own it.
I don't know who did that. That's weird.
I've really been focusing on some kind of short-term projects. A lot of it is, coming out of a several big projects, all the lathes that I've built, and I've got some things kind of piling up that just needed to get done. Had several shows that I had planned for the Renaissance Woodworker that, just ridiculous stuff that I could film in like 5 hours, like build and film in 5 hours, and I just need to do it. So I actually had a really kind of a good week last week. I cranked out 5 different projects. They will all show up on the Renaissance Woodworker, one of which was the tool tote that I posted last week. A couple of little boxes for the Tom Iovino's last minute elf thing he's got going on. And made a bunch of little tweaks here and there. Went back to my lathe and made some tweaks. Created a new pulley for it and made a grinding station for it, and actually sharpened all of my turning tools last night via treadle power, which was kind of fun.
Sweet.
But yeah, and then I just milled up my lumber for the Woodworkers Fighting Cancer easel last night. So
nice.
I'll be hopefully getting to that in the next couple of days. And it looks, I know we've talked about this before, but there's something very fun about just banging out real simple projects.
Yep.
That easel came up at just the right time. I'm probably going to end up donating it to, a local daycare center or something like that when I'm done, because what am I going to use it for? Although my wife is only 5 feet tall, so maybe
it might be just right for her.
Just put it up on the bench. You could use that for your ways you're doing demonstrations.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very nice.
So, it's kind of the perfect timing. It's something with just some real simple joinery and, bang it together, practice maybe a new finish on it or something like that. So,
cool.
Yeah, that type of stuff is really fun. And it's nice to just kind of crank stuff out and finish it. And for me, with my own personal, shall we say, problem, is I have way too much lumber. And I need to build some more stuff and get it out of there. And I think I've got some serious OCD about it too. Because it's like, I don't like the fact that there's this enormous pile of lumber over there. I need to use it. I need to build stuff with it. So
and this is where everybody listening goes, wah!
Yeah, exactly. Oh, poor Shannon. I'd make a violin for him, but he's got all the lumber in his piles.
Well, it is one of those things where we all save those like special, those unique pieces, and they're kind of small, and you think, what am I going to do this for? And to me, that's Christmas time. That's the perfect time to crank out that little box or turn something on the lathe and use up that highly figured or just really interesting small piece of something that you knew you'd hang on to for one reason or another. So
totally.
Yeah, it's very cathartic. I'm cleaning out some of that stuff and turning it into projects.
Well, doing the easel myself in like a day and a half, it really made me think about how much we might tend to, I don't want to say we overcomplicate things, but ultimately I think, the three of us probably...
I overcomplicate things.
Okay. Then we overcomplicate things. But I also think that most woodworkers have this aspiration to just be better and to make things more involved. You want to get deeper into the craft. But doing this one little project, I was like, dude, if this is the caliber of project I was doing all the time, I'd be doing a weekly show. You know what I mean? Like it's actually a fairly simple project that can be turned out in a weekend. It was just a lot of fun, and I totally agree with you. The concept of doing this short, confined project that isn't overcomplicated, doesn't have the most advanced joinery in it, something like that was very refreshing to do.
Well, it's also kind of like a self-diagnostic. You can go, hey, I've gotten better. Look at me. I actually do know what I'm talking about, because don't get me wrong. You want to constantly be challenging yourself. You always want to kind of have that out there. But at the same time, I think that's the difference with like the hobby woodworker who is building one-off type projects and the guy that maybe has a line of furniture and he rebuilds the same pieces over and over again.
Yeah.
I could say that for Adirondack chairs and shaker tables. I've built like God knows how many Adirondack chairs and at least 6 of those little shaker side tables. So you kind of get it down to a science, and the challenge there becomes, how do I make it more efficient? How do I, do this faster, stronger, better, all that fun stuff.
Right.
But, there is that element of being able to see, hey, I've gotten a lot better at cutting tenons.
Right.
So that's kind of fun. It's nice to step back and take stock at how far you've come, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
I know I've mentioned it before. Sometimes you do need to return to the basics to appreciate how far you've actually come.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I brought it into the house, and I was like, I showed Nicole, and I'm like, it just kind of feels pretty cool to go, look what I can do in 2 days. Like this wasn't here 2 days ago, and now it is, and my kid's playing with it. It just reminds me, some of these little projects, especially the ones for your family, and you satisfy a need that's there so they don't have to go buy something. Those actually, no matter how difficult or simple the project is, I think those are the most satisfying. And when you can knock it together that quickly, it's even more so. All right, let's move into what's new. It's where we share some links and resources that we found or other people sent to us. And Matt, if you want to cover those.
Sure, absolutely. This first one came in from Mark, and that's Mark with a K.
Spells it the wrong way.
I don't know if he pronounces Italy wrong either. But anyways, he says, I found this while browsing Google Books. It has issues from 1989 to 1999, and it's American Woodworker magazine in Google Books. Now, I know, Mark, I think you posted this one over on Facebook, and this is pretty neat. I haven't had a chance to go through all of them, but it's often fun to kind of flip through these back catalogs and see all of this great stuff that's in there.
Yeah, and the responses that I got that were pretty interesting were about like the advertising in there and the prices to see. Wasn't that long ago, but the prices are pretty significantly different than what we see today.
Yeah, I was looking at those Grizzly ones, and I'm like, what?
And here's the thing, like old back issues of magazines are really... They're kind of cool if you've never read them before, but I've got so many back issues of magazines that if I were to open them again, it'd be just like I didn't read it before.
Yes,
because it's so long. And you know what? I never touch them. So
it's so funny because I know I've mentioned this before too. If anybody's listening all the way through, you might remember this one from just a few hundred episodes ago. But I always talk about like the fact that when I get a new magazine, I have a hard time sitting down and like reading it. Like I'll read it, but I won't digest it.
Yeah.
But I'll go back maybe like 6 months later, a year later or something, and suddenly I'm like, oh, this article is exactly what I've been looking for. Why didn't I read this earlier? It's the weirdest thing. I can't explain that little glitch in the way my brain works.
Yep.
Yeah, I've become a snob about it. Unless it's digital, I don't read it. It's terrible. Like, I said this at the latest, whatever. We just got an email. Society of American Period Furniture Makers sent out an email like, anytime there's elections for board members and they're talking about the new website and everything. And I just replied, I was like, you guys should really make the journal electric. Oh, you should make that electronic.
That'll be shocking when you get it.
You should make it digital, because I still haven't read the last 3 years, and I hear they're really good. They're sitting there, I've got them in print, and one of these days I'll get around to them. But yeah, I don't know. I don't take
not to drag it out too much, but I find myself now going through various publications, and I see that there's a book that I have that I really enjoy and I turn to all the time. As soon as I see they have a digital version, there's that part of me that's like has that conflict between vinyl and CD in the early days, or in my case, tape and CD. Like, do I get it for the third time now on CD?
Right. Yeah. Well, this is the one thing that I love about Fine Woodworking's paid portion of their website. I don't have to really think about it. Like it pains me to think of how many magazines I have in a box somewhere that aren't cataloged in any way that I could very quickly go, you know what? I'm making a humidor. I wonder if there have been any humidor articles across, this particular set that I have. But I can do that on Fine Woodworking's website very easily and find those articles and get the article right there. So I wish all the magazines were a little bit better about how they present digital versions of the content so that we can search them that way and don't have to worry about storing these things, even in a file format. If you've got these PDFs or something, to be able to search them in an efficient way, it's kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. So,
yeah. Absolutely. Sweet. Well, hey, let's move on to this next one. We have one more, and this one came in from Alan, and he sent in a link to a veneer/lumber dealer in the Atlanta area. He says they have over 1,200 species in stock. They have cartons of veneers that are still in original crates that are more than 30 years old sometimes. We'll have the links in there. He says the big thing that you need to do is when you head to the website, check out the 2-page list of species under quote-unquote specimens and click the long download link. Apparently this link has a whole bunch of pictures of the specimens, so if you aren't sure what that wood looks like and you're trying to decide would it work in your project, yet again, another resource for you.
Very cool. Lots of good veneer stuff we're finding now that we've been talking about it a little bit.
I was talking to my plywood buyer about this, and these guys, these veneer suppliers, and a lot of them specialize in creating custom laid up plywood panels, pick your face veneer or whatever. They are the ultimate, like, just-in-time supplier. There's no possible way that they can anticipate what their customers need, so they just carry enormous inventories of face veneer. And it's sick. And I think what's happened is, a lot of these guys, economy being what it is, have fallen on hard times. So they've started to kind of open up their services to, pun intended, Joe Woodworker. And
I get it.
See what I did there? If you didn't, go back and listen to a couple episodes. But it's crazy because there are places like this that have 100 years worth of material that they've just been buying and stocking, and and it's only been available to architects and large home builders and things like that. And now suddenly they've got to find another revenue source, and there's this whole internet thing. They've started to open it up and start cataloging this stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So in other words, their pain is our gain.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, who is it? The other marketer guy, Patrick Edwards. Although some people would say he is the marketer guy. He stumbled onto something like this, and there was one of these veneer suppliers that was actually going out of business, and he bought their supply.
Wow.
And the dude's got his own warehouse built into the back of his house that's just filled. It's climate controlled and everything, and he's got veneer in there that's hundreds and hundreds of years old because he bought the entire inventory at one time. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
Crazy.
All right, moving on to the poll of the week from our good buddy Tom Iovino at tomsworkbench.com. And he asked the question, would you cut a complex joint if no one could see it and an easier option existed? The answers are interesting because it's almost, at this point, it's kind of early in the poll. It looks pretty even across the board for all of the answers. They're all about 18, 20%-ish. So 18% say without hesitation. 25% say I might give it a shot. 21% say probably not unless I wanted to show how I did it. And 15% said only if there was no other option. And 19% said no way, no how. So I can't wait to see how this one pans out so that some of these start to venture, sort of get away from the pack a little bit to see what the majority think about that. But I'm curious, have you ever done it? Would you ever do it? And one of them is the hidden miter dovetail.
Right.
That's where you've got the dovetail hiding literally under that miter joint. So from the outside, just looks like a miter. On the inside, you've got an actual dovetail joint. And there are reasons where you might functionally want to do something like that where it makes sense, like maybe a bracket foot. But would you guys do that just for the heck of it?
I remember Frank Klaus at one of the first Woodworking in America is kind of talking about that, and I can't remember what his exact response was, but no.
Okay.
No. Yeah, the only way I would do it is the option that's not in that poll is only if someone were watching.
There you go. Yes.
And they usually are.
Point
so.
otherwise?
And I actually think that was Frank Klaus's response is only if somebody's watching, like the client's there and you want to show off.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had a lot of requests to do that hidden miter dovetail joint in a live demo for the hand tool school or something, and it's kind of on my list. I've cut one of them in my life, and it came out all right, but I remember at the time thinking, why would I ever do this?
Yeah, it's sort of that just academic challenge, and just to say that you've done it or that you can do it. It's like a good practice.
Yeah.
And shoot, by the time you do that, regular dovetails are a joke.
It's true. I just cut that rising dovetail joint that Roy Underhill's always talking about on my last live session. I was like, this was a lot of fun. I will never use this, but it was a good exercise.
Exactly. Yeah.
I always tell people every miter joint I do is a dovetailed miter joint, and good luck taking it apart.
There you go. I like that. You could just lie about it. They would never know.
Exactly.
All right, let's go into the kickback. We've got one here today from Craig. I'll go ahead and read this one. He says, I just got done listening to Wood Talk 152 when you mentioned a kickback about diamond plates needing a break-in period. I think I might have to call BS on that. Is that bandsaw or?
I think so, yes.
Bobsled?
Yes.
What's B? Okay.
Bobsled.
I think it might just
Bob
be
Smith from Newaygo.
Bob Smith. I think it just might be a faulty product. I purchased the 6-inch DMT extra coarse diamond plate specifically for resetting the bevels on my steels. When I bought it, it was noticeably coarse. I used it to reset the bevels on 2 chisels, and after that, the plate was no longer extra coarse. I had bought the plate bought the plate from the local woodcraft, and I guess he returned it. And he got another one as a replacement, and the guys at the store even said, yes, it's very different. The new ones are coarse. This one is not. Well, shortly after having that one, I had the same problem. This time I tried to contact DMT directly and ask them what was up. Unfortunately, got no reply. I ended up keeping it, and I just use it now to lap my water stones. But my 1000 grit Norton does a better job for aggressive removal than this one does. And this was not the case right out of the box. Now, this might not be a big issue with the higher grits, but for the lower grits, it's definitely a problem. Buyer beware. And I actually wrote Craig back just to give him my personal feedback on this. I've got one of the extra coarse stones, and the same thing happened to me. My assumption was that by the time that material on the surface wore down, that was the stuff that was left over from the manufacturing process. And by the time it wore down, I then had the true intended surface, which is a little bit smoother. And I still use it, and it still works fine for me. So I don't know that it's a flaw in the product so much as that's just the surface that they're providing you with. What do you guys think about that?
I have this stone, and I know what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What I discovered, see, here's the thing, and what really brought it up is when he said his 1000 grit Norton does a better job. A Norton waterstone is friable, means it breaks apart. So every time it breaks apart, it's constantly exposing new grit. A diamond stone is not friable. It does not break up. So what you're relying upon is the extreme hardness of those abrasive particles not wearing down. But at the same time, you're creating swarf from the steel itself. So those stones will glaze relatively, not relatively easily, but what I found with the extra coarse one is I really had to wash that sucker when I was done. Because if you let that swarf dry, it does not come off. And you kind of have to hit it with like a stiff bristled brush and work it to within an inch of its life to clean it off. So it's more than just kind of dunking it in water or running under the faucet. You need to run it under the faucet and like scrub it with a brush in order to get that gunk out of there. And because it's so aggressive, it pulls a lot of steel off. I mean, he said it. He's using it to reset the bevels on his steel. I did the same thing for a while before I bought a grinding stone, and it stopped cutting aggressively like really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And my first thought was, oh, I glazed it. So I went and cleaned it, and it went back. So the only thing I'll tell him is he needs to give it a really, really good cleaning. And if it still doesn't work, he might want to think about some sort of solvent. Now, research this more than me just pulling this out of my butt, because I don't know what the binders are on those.
Just dip it in acetone. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, maybe something
fine.
like mineral spirits would be enough, or naphtha rather. I don't know, but that's probably what's going on. The fact that it's happened twice now.
Yeah.
DMT, I don't know too much about the company, but they've been around a long time, and these things are not made. This isn't like, Lee Nielsen, where there's one person who's standing there assembling your inlay tool.
Mm-hmm.
This is made like in a computerized, machined process to like incredible tolerances. I have to believe, well, I could be full of it, but the QA in that factory is probably pretty good. They generally have a pretty good reputation. So maybe it was a bad batch. It could be. They all came out of the same machine. Maybe it was a bad batch. But I bet you that it's probably just gotten clogged up.
Yeah. Well,
clean it.
And I don't get too aggressive with mine. I just use one of those Nagura stones, the little white stones. The same thing I use to clean off my regular stones. So that seems to work fairly well for me. But
look at it this way. If he leaves the stone out and it turns orange or turns rusty, there's an indication.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of metal in there.
I was going to say that, really, if you think about it, if it's an extra coarse stone, at the microscopic level, that surface there's a lot of surface space in there for things to grab a hold of and get.
It's like an English muffin.
It. Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's a great analogy. Yeah, and it's going to fill up right away. So yeah, you probably, since you're removing so much material, you probably do need to actually stop periodically and maybe clean out those little nooks and crannies that are going on there. So maybe that's, again, like we've already iterated there, that might be going on too, that it's filling up quite a bit. I do want to say, I also tried to reach out to the folks at DMT to ask them if maybe they might have a little insight. They haven't responded as of this recording. I did start it with, do you know who I am? And you should answer me. So that might have automatically thrown me into the recycle bin. But
did you tell them that you thought DMT stood for Dirty Monkey Turds?
I thought it was Dave Matthews
Tribute?
Turnaround.
Dave Matthews Tribute Band?
Nice.
There you go. Yes, the DMTs.
Nice. All right, cool. Let's move on to our voicemail. We've got one here from Traharn. Traharn? He says it in the beginning. I forget how he says it.
Hey, Mark, Matt, and Shannon. My name is Traharn, and I live up in
I got it.
the Yukon, Canada. We're way up north, and I just got a quick question about sharpening. I would like to keep my water stones in my workshop. My workshop is in a one-car garage behind my house, and it's not heated at night, and it gets pretty cold. I'm wondering, do you guys know of anybody who has used any kind of alcohol in the water to keep the sharpening stone in? I'm thinking of using methyl hydrate or some other type of alcohol and mixing it in so that the stones don't freeze, because I'd like to be able to use them, not bring them in the house every night. Anyway, please let me know. I listen to the show all the time. I'm going through the back episodes. I think I'm on episode 95. Anyway, I get a lot of enjoyment and humor from you guys. So thanks very much and keep it up. And I look forward to hearing my call on the show. Thanks very much. Bye.
All right.
Humor, he means me. I just want to let people know.
Yes. And Matt, you can attest to this. Science is pretty sexy, right? Wouldn't you say?
Oh, it's the hottest thing I've ever seen. Those lab coats.
I think it's sexy. I try to convince Nicole that it's sexy. She married me, and I was, doing science work at the time. So, I think it's sexy. So I'm going to play a little sexy music while I answer this question.
Oh, please do. This is going to be awesome.
Bear with me, guys. Here we go. All right. So I looked it up online, and the average overnight low in Yukon, Canada is about minus 22 degrees Celsius. Now, in order to lower the freezing point of water to minus 22, you need to add approximately 40% alcohol by volume. And there's some toxicity concerns with methyl hydrate, also known as methanol. So, all right, let me cut this music. That's terrible.
Oh my gosh, you had me at by volume and toxicity. I hope Sam's ready for tonight as soon as this show's over with.
It's on.
6.023 times 10 to the 23rd. What? Wait, hold on.
Yes.
It's on like the periodic table.
Avogadro's number, baby. All right, so here's the thing. I did look it up. Yukon, Canada, the average overnight low the lowest it's going to get in wintertime is about minus 22 for him. So what we need to do is figure out what volume of alcohol you'd have to add to the water to even get it to the point that it won't freeze, to sort of hit his goal here. So what I found, and this is just up to this chart that I found, and hopefully it's correct, is you need about 40% by volume of alcohol in that mixture in order to protect it so that it doesn't freeze. I think that brings it to like minus 23 then becomes the freezing point. So it's still close. So you need at least 40%. Now here's the problem. That's a lot of alcohol. And this is something that, like, unless you want to sharpen with gloves on, which you might because it's probably flipping cold in your workspace there. But yeah, ultimately you're going to want to protect your hands from this. So you can think about the different types of antifreeze type materials that you could work with. And one of them, so instead of methanol, let's think about ethanol. Now, if you have denatured alcohol, that's primarily ethanol, but there still are other things added to it so that it is not, drinkable. So it still has toxicity that you need to be concerned with. You also might consider like propylene glycol, and that's also something at 40% that would make it a little bit safer. But I mean, it's going down a path here that I don't know that I'm comfortable even recommending because yes, it's
what's
possible.
The volatility of these substances too? Like how often are you going to have to replace that in your solution?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're going to have evaporation that's going to change things. And what is the effect on alcohol or any of these other solutions on the stones themselves?
That's what I was wondering.
I don't know. I mean, there are things that you could expose these stones to that will start to sort of disintegrate the binder, and then you're left with, a stone that's falling apart. So there's a lot of things that have me concerned. I'd hate to see this guy working with, something that's like 50% alcohol all the time. It just seems like just keep a small bath, and yeah, it sucks, but you just got to bring it inside and keep that temperature up.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Just a couple of stones, you can bring them in and out without any problem. Sure, it's nice to have them sitting there waiting for you, but I don't know. I really think that we're kind of pushing the limits here.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, so I guess it can be done. I just don't know that. I mean, maybe someone
I'd be
else...
concerned like you'd be using a lot of like antifreeze, and suddenly the neighbors start talking. They're like, I don't know what's going on in there, but
yeah. And if anyone lives in a very cold climate and you've got a solution for this, no pun intended. Solution, get it?
Yes, yeah. There was a pun intended for that.
If you have to point out the pun, it's not very funny. All right, so email. Let's do that. I got a question here from Tyler. He says, I'm planning on starting my first project involving dovetails in the near future, and I was hoping you guys could help me decide if I should hand cut them or machine cut them. As of right now, I don't have a dovetail saw or a dovetail jig for my router, and I'd love to make an informed decision as to which one I should buy. I'd love to hear Mark present the pro machine cut side, and Shannon represent the pro hand cut argument, and Matt just moderate and provide riveting color commentary.
All right, well, here we go, Tyler. We're getting ready to cue this up right now. Mark on the side there with his machines. Vroom, vroom. How about that?
Vroom, vroom. That should be my tagline for my show. Vroom,
And
vroom.
Shannon, shh.
That's good.
Is that someone snoring? Is that what that was? All right.
Not me anymore with that CPAP machine, just ask Sean.
All right. Well, here's the problem, and the reason I put this in here is I don't know that I could fully represent the power machine cut side in the way that you're hoping, Tyler, because I think in the beginning, I think it's great for someone to grab some chisels and a saw and make a couple of dovetails by hand. It's an incredibly important lesson in sawing, cutting to a line and chiseling to a line. So I love my router jig, but it really is something that only comes out when I've got a bunch of dovetails to make. So maybe like a whole bank of drawers, or I'm doing dovetail cabinets or dovetail drawers in my shop or something like that, and I just need to knock them out. That's the times that I typically will depend on the machine cut dovetails in the first place. So for me, I mean, would either of you recommend that someone just goes right to the dovetail jig as a beginner, or do you think it's good as a woodworker to go with that saw and chisel initially?
Do I even have to answer that?
Shannon, you don't.
Well, let's do
excluded.
this. I will say that if you take the time to purchase a decent dovetail jig, I would recommend going that route just because of the fact that, well, you can do quite a bit with it. You'll get really good results. You won't have that frustration. Although I'm having a hard time going with this debate because I do everything by hand now because I had such a crappy jig.
Yeah, that could be an issue
I guess
too.
it really depends on your comfort. How much are you willing to? Both of them have a bit of a learning curve, especially depending on which jig you go with. I know a lot of people will say you buy the right one and it's pretty much usable right out of the box, which I have a hard time believing. But sure, okay, we'll play that game. I don't know. I can't say for sure. I guess if we knew more of Tyler's background.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, most of the time when this question comes up, it's typically someone who already has some version of a dovetail jig in their shop.
Right.
And they're looking to, delve into the hand-cut world. Here's a situation that's a little different. He doesn't have either, but apparently he's been doing his research and listening to podcasts and whatnot. So he has this awareness that both of these options are out there and hasn't made that purchase yet. And along the lines of what you're saying there, Matt, if he does purchase a dovetail jig, I do recommend he gets a good one. And that's hundreds of dollars later.
I was going to say, you might actually save money going the hand tool route here.
You
don't have to buy, a $200 dovetail saw.
Exactly.
I know many people who used, what is the Veritas saw these days? Like $69 or something?
I want to say, well, I will look it up. And so you keep talking about it and we'll go
I know
from
many
there.
people who've used that for a long time. I've cut, many a dovetail with it myself. There are options. There's even cheaper ones. You can go the Japanese saw route, buy yourself a Dozuki for like $20. And there's certainly a lot of people who go that route. Now, if he doesn't have chisels or anything like that, you're adding in chisels to that.
But you need those anyway. I mean, you got to have those to begin with.
Right. So the way I see it, the tools and certainly the skills that he would gain by cutting it by hand will be much more useful down the road than the skill of learning to use that dovetail jig.
Yeah.
Right. It comes in at $69, as you had mentioned.
Hey, look at that. I must
when
have
you
looked
say
at that
price is
recently.
right.
I'm never right on numbers like that.
Cool.
Well, and another thing, going with the dovetail saw itself, it's something that you should always practice with your tools anyways, and you can practice all sorts of, on scraps and everything else to get it, and it doesn't really take that long. Once you get a feel for it, once you can cut to a nice straight line, you can pretty much do your dovetails. There's no major concern with it whatsoever. I mean, that was my big thing, is going down and just cutting 90-degree lines basically, down the board. And once I was able to kind of strike that line, boom, I was golden.
Yeah, and you know what? There's about 1,000 videos online that you could watch for how to do this, and they all kind of show you the same thing. So
exactly,
there's no shortage in education on learning dovetail. So
Tyler, if you're looking for permission, just do it.
Do it, man. Do it. All right, Shannon.
Yes, sir. Well, we had a question from Wade, who said, I'm recently working on a 3/4 inch thick face frame with mortise and tenon joints. The upper rail had a very narrow tenon, about 1¼ inches by 5/16. I had a difficult time chopping the mortise for this by hand. There just wasn't enough room to lever out the chips with my mortise chisel. So I had to resort to drilling out the core and paring the sides to fit. Any advice on chopping a small mortise with just the chisel? Suck it up and drill it out to start? Hand tool only solutions, please. Well, what I'm curious with is, isn't a drill a hand tool?
Even the powered one, I mean, I hold it in my hand and use it in such a manner.
I mean, whether it's powered or not, it's a hand tool. So, I mean, really, the most efficient way to do this is with a drill. Whether you're using an egg beater drill, a brace and bit, or cordless, Ryobi or whatever, I think that's probably the best way to do it. But you can do it with just a chisel. What did I mention? Those shaker side tables earlier. The drawer side there where that lower rail intersects the legs, that's a 3/4 inch by 1.5 inch wide rail that goes into those legs, and you've got to put a tenon in there. If you do a single tenon, you're talking about maybe a 1/2 inch wide, maybe 5 inch wide or thick tenon that's maybe 1 inch wide. So it's a very small mortise. One of them I did that little twin mortise and tenon thing where you've got the two tenons side by side, and that was like almost a 1/2 inch square tenon. It can be done, while the easiest way is just drill it out. You can just use a chisel, and it becomes less about levering out the chips and more of working towards the center. So you want to take a cut with the bevel towards the center of the mortise, kind of maybe 1/3 of the way into the center of the mortise. You make a cut with the bevel facing the center, then flip it around and make another cut with the bevel facing the center until you extract like a little V out of the middle. And then you just keep repeating that. And what happens is you're not really levering anything out. You're just cutting towards the void in the center. And the chips will just kind of pop out. Now, what you may end up doing is getting something like a scratch-all or, heck, a pencil or something to kind of go in there and kind of pick the chips out that get stuck in the bottom. It's a little bit slower because you're basically taking a lighter bite with each chisel chop, if you will.
Cool.
Does that make sense to you guys?
It sure does, Shannon.
Yeah.
There you go.
Definitely.
Sweet. Long run, use a drill.
There you go. When in doubt, drill it out.
Oh, I like that.
All right, well, hey, this next question comes in from Kenji, and he says, have you guys seen Steel City's new blue line? I did. I saw it was at AWFS. I think I was looking at the YouTube videos, but I see you have more to this question, so let me go on. If I plan on cutting at most a 16/4 rock maple stock, would a 1/2 horsepower be enough power, or will I need the 1 horsepower version? At $260 for a bandsaw, it is extremely attractive. Thanks for your opinion. So when it comes down to it, I feel like a lot of people, again, are falling into the more power means that you can just do amazing things. I'm going to go back to my old bandsaw that I have, which I had was a 14-inch, and it was like 1/3 horsepower, maybe 1/2 horsepower, something like that. And I had no problem ripping through, say, like ash. I don't think it was like 16/4. Well, actually, 16/4, that's 4 inches. So yeah, there was a few times that I resawed the ash on that particular bandsaw. For me, the main thing is it still comes down to, and I keep saying this over and over, it's feed rate and a nice sharp blade, and I guarantee that you can tackle this. Now, the big question for me is this a type of material you're going to be working with on a regular basis? If that's the case, then I might suggest maybe going up to the larger horsepower, simply because if you're going to be using this type of material all the time, you're really going to probably start taxing that motor to a large degree. At least that's what I keep thinking as I think about this situation. So in that case, I probably would maybe suggest going up to the 1 horsepower version. But overall, I just think if you take the time to adjust that feed rate so that you can, let the machine do the work, let the blade do the work, have the right type of blade on this. I mean, you definitely don't want a super fine blade on. You want to have one that's going to be able to remove the material so it won't, again, start stressing out the motor. Make sure your guide blocks are all set up and and kind of go from there. So, yes, I think you could easily handle the half horsepower with that type of material.
The funny thing is I've heard a lot of people say that, you don't really need a whole lot of horsepower because you have a good quality blade that's nice and sharp. And like you said, the feed rate, the calibration, if it's all there, you should be able to cut just about anything on any bandsaw. The problem is my blade is never perfectly sharp. And
no, it's not.
My calibration is never perfect because, maybe it was for a while, but it's not now. And I tend to be just like, well, I just got to make this cut and get through this. And if it's slightly off, I'll fix it later. And that's always the situation. So for me, I need a little more than a half horse. And it's really because of my laziness and lack of willingness to change the blade as much as I should. But I think for someone who actually does want to put that a little bit of extra effort and attention into it, you can get quite a bit done with that half horsepower.
Well, I think it comes down to the tooth geometry more than anything else. Sharpness is nice, but the thicker the stock, the bigger the gullets you need. The more aggressive, or not so much aggressive, but the bigger the tooth, really, and therefore the bigger the gullet. To give it, I had a 3/4 horse bandsaw for years, and I did my whole Rubo workbench with that. So I was cutting 4-inch thick stock. Through that, I was cutting 5-inch thick stock for the legs all the time. Look at it this way: I use a frame saw that works off 1/16 horsepower, and I can cut through this stuff. It's just a matter of choosing the geometry of the tooth. Using a 3 points per inch saw in my blade in my frame saw, I can resaw some crazy stock at 1/16 horsepower. By the way, that's human horsepower. Essentially, is 1/16 horsepower.
Did you guys see the Dodge commercial for Anchorman 2 with the horse?
Yes.
He's poking fun at the poor horse.
Speaking of horsepower.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it just comes down to the realization and that certain size machines are going to have limitations, and being willing to work with those limitations, or simply just save up and go for the larger one if you don't want to work with the limitations. But definitely.
All right, so I'm confused by what's in the show notes here next. So
I think this is because Matt deleted one of my questions, so I just dropped it in there, and I think I put it in the wrong order. So
okay.
Actually, Shannon, I wanted to let you know that we no longer let you have 2 questions.
You
We
only
did
get
a
one.
vote behind your back.
Demoted.
You take too long to answer, so you
I've
only
been
get
demoted. Well, I got a question from Matthew, and it was a little similar to a question we got very recently from Kenji, who I think is trying to win an award for most questions asked of the Wood Talk
I'm
podcast.
glad you said that. He's our new Roberto. Kenji is the new Roberto.
Roberto, you better start asking questions, man, because your title's about to be threatened.
Get on it.
Anyway, Matthew said, I'd like to start cutting dovetails by hand, and I'm looking at a Lee Nielsen dovetail saw. The only problem is that there are 3 types. While each one lists its advantage, they're not really compared to one another in terms of what sort of work or woodworker would benefit from a particular type. Can you fill me in on the difference between regular, progressive pitch, and tapered models? Can you make a suggestion as to which one is best? And this ties a little into Kenji's question because he went to a hand tool, Lee Nielsen hand tool event, and was playing with one of their saws and was like so shocked at how well it outperformed his Veritas saw that he was just like, this is crazy. I'm going to ditch my Veritas saw and go with a Lee Nielsen saw. And it's reminded me of the value of choosing your hand tool when you've had a chance to use it. So I can explain the differences of the Lee Nielsen saws, and you could buy one and still end up maybe not liking it. So I realize it's easier said than done because you can't just go and pick these things up. But Lee Nielsen hand tool events, they're getting around. So unless you live in the Yukon, you might have one somewhat close. And if it's somewhat close, you might think about driving, or go to Woodworking in America, or borrow somebody who has one, or something like that. There is a lot to be said because there's a lot of different variables, from the hang angle to the tooth geometry to the handle itself, that will determine how well that saw cuts in your hand. So I think that's one of the things that we seem to be getting away from with hand tools. There's a lot of great makers out there that have a lot of different options, and you may pick it up and go, man, this thing sucks, because it just doesn't work for your particular body mechanics. And the more boutique makers we get, the more highly refined these tools become, the more they may not work at all for you because you're left-handed and walk with a limp. So it is something to keep in mind. Ideally, when it comes to Veritas and Lee Nielsen, they're making their tools for the wider audience, so they're not as highly tuned as, say, Bad Axe or Superior or Blackburn Toolworks or any of these guys that making really, really boutique tools. So that being said, regular progressive pitch and tapered models. I had a progressive pitch Lee Nielsen saw for many, many years. Liked it a lot. Wouldn't recommend buying it again. Progressive pitch is a gimmick. And I'm going to anger people by saying that, but it becomes a little bit harder to sharpen because suddenly you're changing your gullet size and you have to change files midway through sharpening, which, sharpen a dovetail saw enough times, your eyes start to hurt because those teeth are so small. And if you have to pay attention to when I'm supposed to switch files, you're going to mess it up. So that becomes an issue. The progressive pitch is meant to make the saw easier to start by putting smaller teeth out at the toe. You can start really any saw, regardless of tooth size, by taking the weight off the toe of the saw. And I've proven this in a live event I did where I started a 5-point per inch rip saw on Ipe, which is harder than granite. It's possible just by removing the weight from the toe of the saw. So it becomes technique. So now you have to ask yourself, do I really need progressive pitch out on the front? So the regular saw, to me, just a constant, whatever the PPI is, I think it's 15. They offer a couple different ones, but we'll just say 15 points per inch, constant from heel to toe. It ends up being easier to sharpen. You don't get any kind of transition point when you're sawing from fine tooth to coarser tooth. The tapered model means that there is less saw plate below the back at the toe than there is at the heel of the plate. And the idea is now if you've ever been cutting a joint and you get to your line on one side and realize you blew past your baseline on the back side, that's what the tapered model does. It prevents that from happening. A lot of the vintage saws have this function. It's something that's starting to come back into the saw vernacular, if you will, these days. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's probably a good idea. I think, I don't know too much about the specs of that. The one thing I would urge a new dovetailer to avoid is the thin plate that Lee Nielsen offers. I think you're going to be more prone to tweaking that blade with a really thin plate than you will with the standard thickness plate. And since Lee Nielsen doesn't, I don't know if they epoxy, but they groove their backs. They don't have a friction fit bent back like somebody like Bad Axe Toolworks does. It's really hard to correct when you kink that saw plate. So I would just go with a regular plain old dovetail saw in the thicker plate and go from there.
Wonderful.
That was a lot, I know.
All right. I got a question here from, who is it? I'm a little lost here. Okay, Jim. I've recently encountered a problem while ripping some teak to where I've noticed some slipping of my blade. I've got a brand new 10-root blade on the saw, and Mark, I follow the same guidelines as you do as far as hand tightening my arbor nut and then giving one good tap on the wrench so that I don't over-tighten anything. What I want to know is if my problem would be solved by purchasing a pair of 5x1/4-inch arbor washers from Lee Valley to grab and stiffen the blade more, or is my saw just underpowered at 1.5 horsepower? Can I tell my wife that in your professional opinion, I need a bigger saw? I'm not sure if the larger cabinet saws come with larger washers, so have you guys ever tried the larger washers yourself, or have you any tricks for slipping blades? I don't work much with softwood, so this is a problem I need to resurrect. I guess he meant correct or resolve. Resolve and correct put together are resurrect.
Yeah, that he just really likes the problem and he wants to keep redoing it over and over.
Yeah. All right. So the blade slipping. Now, here's the thing. I know you went back and forth a little bit with him, Matt, so maybe you could provide some insight. Is the blade itself slipping on the arbor, or is this a gear or belt slippage issue?
I'm going to have to go back through the emails real quick, but if I remember correctly, it's slipping on the arbor itself.
Okay, so
that's why I feel like we've answered this question. That's right, because there was a whole email thread.
This one, and I just don't remember the details. But all right, so if this happens, number one, I'm going to be looking at the arbor flange or the nut and just making sure that everything is the way it's supposed to be, because if maybe you're not getting full contact around the perimeter of that particular the one that comes with the saw. I don't know if you call it a flange or whatever, but if it doesn't make good contact, you're gonna have an issue. So check that. And the thing he's suggesting, the arbor washers, that actually doesn't sound like a bad idea, because that's something that's going to be machined flat, and if you could fit it on there, if there's room on your arbor for that and you tighten it up, that may provide that extra bit of grip that he isn't getting for whatever reason. So that might be a quick fix, rather than trying to, maybe flatten the surface of the arbor flange or the nut itself to make sure it's gripping perfectly all around the perimeter of it. So I would that's actually not a bad idea. I don't know that you necessarily need a bigger saw, but what you might look into is make sure you get a thin curved blade on there. He didn't say which particular Tenru blade he's got, but if you've got a full curved blade, that may be a little bit more work than your 1.5 horsepower saw wants to do, especially on something like teak. So those are if the blade is slipping on the arbor.
Right, and that for sure. I just went back in and checked, and he said, yes, my blade is actually slipping on the arbor when running rip cuts.
Okay, so I think he's actually on the right track with the arbor washers. I'd give that a shot. If you still have an issue, you may even contact the manufacturer and just have them think about the situation a little bit. Maybe you just need a new arbor nut sent to you, something that might be flatter. Maybe the surface just isn't flat enough. But that's what I would suggest. This kind of thing always makes me nervous, and giving advice on it makes me a little bit nervous, because it's obvious, safety issues to be concerned about.
Absolutely.
But I definitely think the stiffeners being milled nice and flat should do a really good job. Now, on my saw, I've got that little flange washer type deal, and then the nut comes in behind it. All right, and as long as that thing is nice and flat and makes good contact, and it's about, I don't know, maybe 3 inches in diameter, so it covers a good portion of the blade. That's essentially what the blade stiffener that he's talking about would do. It would just spread out that surface area and hopefully grip the blade a little bit better.
Right. Sweet.
Maybe this is obvious, but did he clean all the crap off that brand new blade?
I hope so.
All the oil and all the... I remember when I got my my Forest Woodworker 2 blade, it was like dunked in whatever it is, cosmoline or whatever that stuff is.
That's called schmutz.
Yeah, schmutz.
That's the technical term.
And it had all that wax, like they dipped in the teeth to protect the carbide, and I had to peel all that stuff off, and there was just so much gunk all over the thing. I had to clean it thoroughly before I could actually put it in my saw. So just maybe that's like, is your computer plugged in?
Yeah, I hope that's not the case, but definitely good to mention that.
Right.
Sweet. Well, hey, we ready to move on to this last question here?
Do it.
All right, this one came in from Steve, and he says, I was reading the instruction for Ron Hawk's new knife kits, and the procedure to attach handles to the tang of the blade involves using epoxy. Now, Ron states to stay away from the 5-minute epoxies. Why? I know you've talked about epoxy on the podcast before, but can't remember if you addressed the different qualities of long set epoxies versus 5-minute epoxy. It would be great if you could give us some guidelines in the use of the different formulas of epoxy. Okay, so what I did was I reached out to Ron, because Ron's a buddy. And actually, you know what, folks, if you actually tried to contact Ron, I can almost guarantee in most situations he would contact you back and just kind of fill all the stuff in for you. So, that's one of the great things about these manufacturers.
Matt, too.
Yeah. What? So anyways, I'm going to ignore that, Shannon.
He has a matte filter and folder in his email, so he knows.
Yeah, he pretty much does, actually. I noticed, I saw the feedback on this one. But he says, anyway, so I asked Ron about this, and he was saying that he discourages the use of 5-minute epoxy mainly because if you're not proficient at putting handles on knives, things can go wonky. And if they do it with a 5-minute epoxy, you pretty much have a disaster on your hands just waiting to happen. So Ron feels that the slow set 2-part epoxies not only give you almost an hour to kind of dink around until everything goes together properly, but he feels that they're stronger in the long run as well. So in other words, please don't be in a hurry. Enjoy the process, and you're going to make yourself a really beautiful blade in the end. So that's Ron's reason for doing the 5-minute, or not doing the 5-minute epoxy, staying far away from the 5-minute epoxy. And to me, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of times, unless you have some sort of setup where you know for sure how this thing is going to go together. Anytime I've tried something for the first time, or I'm kind of just really making sure that things have to be lined up just the right way, that always seems to be when they never do. And so it'd be nice to have that little wiggle room in there. Unfortunately, experience so far with epoxy has pretty much been like that 5-minute stuff that I like get from the home center, and it comes like a syringe with like 2 parts, and then I put it together, and then I can't get my fingers apart later on or something. So Shannon, do you have any epoxy experience? But I know, Mark, you do.
Well, I do know that when I've built fly rods before, they say the same thing: stay away from the quickset stuff, because it ends up, it's almost like it's not as pure. If there's air bubbles or anything in the mix, they don't have time to like rise out of the solution, and you end up with a poor finish. Because when you're making a fly rod, that epoxy is the finish coat to cover up your threads and everything. So you specifically want a slow dry to give it time to kind of, I don't know, settle.
It seems like just about anything that has a curing process cures better if it is able to do it slowly.
Yeah.
I mean, almost across the board, you hear that for things that cure. So it seems to make sense.
It's funny because I meant to go to you, Mark, but for some reason Shannon came out, because I guess I'm thinking about Shannon right now.
You do that in the middle of the show sometimes. I've seen
It makes me very uncomfortable.
daydreaming about Shannon and his hand tools.
Exactly. I've got the wood magazine of him right here with that great picture.
Yeah. For me, I haven't used the 5-minute epoxy in forever. I've got the West Systems epoxy that I use, and I do have a fast drying activator, basically. So you've got the slow set and the long set, and I use them both. But even the fast set stuff, it still seems to give me more working time than your average 5-minute epoxy. But for me, the big thing and the reason why I like using it so much, and pardon the airplanes, they're on a mission today.
They want to let you know what they think about the epoxy also.
Yeah. The reason I do it is because they're much looser, so you could pour them, and it's great for filling knots and cracks and things like that, and really spreading it over a surface. The 5-minute epoxy stuff that you get from the big box store, it's very gooey, it's very hard to spread. So if on a small little thing that you're putting together, fine, but anything on any larger of a scale, and if you want to spread it around, it's just too thick to do that. So I don't, that's why I don't even touch the stuff anymore.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, iTunes reviews. If you want to leave us a review in iTunes, you could do that. Just look us up in the iTunes store, click on ratings and reviews, and you can ask Matt how much he charges for an early Christmas goose.
Well, right now it goes at market rate, so it'll vary from day to day. Just email me and I'll let you know.
Sweet. All right, we want to thank What's Chiz? What Chiz? Who says great show.
I'm so glad that you get to pronounce all these things.
Which is, he says, great show, he or she. The only podcast I listen to the day that it comes out. Great advice, good humor, and wide-ranging woodworking advice. The chemistry between the hosts is amazing. I can't believe they've almost never done this face-to-face. Keep up the good work. Sound like
Wow.
we're gonna...
So it was really uncomfortable when we were in the hotel room actually doing it face to face. That was probably like one of the worst moments ever. No offense, guys.
That was a little bit weird. Well, Matt winking at me, having to like maintain eye contact with Shannon while he's talking. It was all very weird.
It definitely was. And it had nothing to do with the MWA guys coming in and attacking us.
That's true. All right. Remember, today's show is sponsored by Festool at festoolusa.com. And not Audible. I took that out of there, but someone put everything back in that I removed. So
who is that? There must be an intern that we have going on right now.
I don't know. And also, if you want to help out the show with a one-time donation or a small recurring donation, you could do that. Just go to woodtalkshow.com and look for the links over on the left-hand side. And we always appreciate it when folks help us out in that way. And Matt, how about you give them the contact info and we'll get out of here.
All right, folks. Hey, do you have a comment, a question, or a topic suggestion that maybe I could lose in the show notes also? We would love to have that happen. You have several different ways to contact us. Leave us a voicemail on Skype. Our username is WoodTalkOnline. Call our voicemail line at 623-242-5180. Email us at woodtalkonline@gmail.com or leave us a comment on our Wood Talk Facebook page. Hey, and if you're ever looking for the show notes or downloads from today's show, hey, check over there at woodtalkshow.com. I don't know why I keep saying hey. It just sounds really fun right now.
Hey, why not?
Hey,
why not? Let's just do it.
Gets people's attention.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good. How about you?
Great.
Not too bad. I'm finally finishing up this show. I'm going to go eat after a little bit.
Me too. Sounds good. All right. Well,
sounds good.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
See you. Bye.
Boink. All right. Suddenly at the end, I don't know whether the wire on my headphones turned the dial, but something got really... Everybody was very loud in my headphones for the last few minutes.
We're just really excited.
Ouch.
We're getting to the end. I want to do the story.
All right. Killing the broadcast and...